All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. We are particularly excited today as we start kicking off April and getting exciting with a new month largely focused on climate change. But right now, we've got 5 classes from across North America joining us, so I want to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout-out. We've got Miss Charles's grade 6s in Brampton, Ontario. Hi, guys. We've got Miss Dix's grade 4 through 6s in Woodstock, Ontario, too. Hey, we've got Miss Oliverson's grade 5s in San Antonio, Texas. So many of you, I love it. We've got Mr. Bartnick's grade 4 through 5s in Enid, Oklahoma. You guys are so low pitched. I love it. We got like a choir going here. And then last but not least, Miss Martin's class joining us for the first time from Montreal, Quebec. Not Montreal, Quebec. That's later. Grade 6 is Princeton, New Jersey. Sorry about that. Hi, guys. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. We are joined live by Anna Morris and colleague at the Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences, joining us again to share their wonderful world of birds. So today they're going to showcase their hawks. So we're really excited to learn a little bit about them. And without further ado, so we can get to the birds, I'll turn it over to Anna. Thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Lovely. Thank you, Jesse. Well, it's good to meet everyone. My name is Anna. I'm one of the environmental educators here at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. This is my colleague, Nathan. He's also an environmental educator. And we do a lot of different things here. Basically, we are a nonprofit nature center that's focused on inspiring about the natural world. And we do so in a bunch of different ways. One of them is through education. So you can come visit us at our nature center and meet some of our ambassador animals and learn a little bit about their life and their habitat, and also about the ecosystem around us here where we are in New England. We also do summer camps and field trips and outreach programs and all manner of things like that. And we teleconference with classrooms all over North America through Nat Geo. We also do some research, which is focused on citizen science research. So we encourage people to get involved with the scientific process through programs like Nest Watch or Feeder Watch, mostly run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They give us a way to contribute actual scientific observations that you and I make, even though we might not be scientists, to scientists who can use that information to learn a little bit more about our world. Now, the third thing we do here at VINS is what we're known for in our local community, and that's our avian wildlife rehabilitation. That means that we have a bird hospital right here on site, and we see injured and orphaned birds that are brought to us by members of the public that live nearby. So we see between 300 and 500 birds every year through our hospital doors, and our goal with every single one of them is to get them back out into the wild. That's where they belong. That's where they're happiest and healthiest. That's where they're going to thrive and contribute to their species once again. So we want them to go back into the wild if they can, but unfortunately not all of them are capable of it. Some of them maybe have a broken wing, or they can no longer see out of one eye, and so they can't go back into the wild where they would want to live. So for those birds, we give them kind of a career change, and we offer them to live here with us at VINS as animal ambassadors. So the 2 birds that we're going to meet today, one of them has an injury that they sustained somewhere in Vermont. They came to our wildlife clinic, and unfortunately, they can no longer fly well enough to be wild, and that's why they're here. The other bird has a bit of a different story, and I guess without further ado, I will let my colleague Nathan introduce you to that bird. A little bit about them and about their habitat, because these are 2 very, very unique birds that live in completely different habitats. And so their adaptations for those places are very different. All right, well, then Nathan, take it away.
This is Chester Lynde, that's his name. He is a Harris's hawk. Harris's hawk dwelling birds. So his habitat is a pretty harsh one, and it tends to dry, it tends to be hot, and it tends to be sunny. It also tends to be high in competition. So this guy has some adaptations on his body that I would love for you to see, and you can see them pretty close up here. They're adaptations that help him thrive in his specific environment. The first one I want to show you is his short shorts. just like if I were walking through a desert, I might want to wear a pair of shorter shorts. His feathers stop pretty high up on his feet or his legs. And what that does is helps him stay cool in an otherwise hot environment. Feathers are super warm. They're one of the most insulative natural things we have on the planet. And so if you've got a lot of feathers, you're going to be really hot. So he has fewer feathers than other general aptitude. The next thing he has, though, has to do with the amount of sunlight, though. And that is his. If you look at him and he looks back at you, he kind of has this angry or evil looking glare. But it's not that he's angry or evil. It's just that he looks like he has furrowed eyebrows all the time. Those eyebrows of his stick out really far over his eyes. We call it his baseball cap. It does the same thing that a baseball cap would do for us. It prevents the sunlight from shining directly into his eyes from above. And the scientific word for those really big eyebrows are large supraorbital ridges. And they help him see over an open, sunny landscape. Those are two of the physical adaptations that allow him to thrive in a desert environment. But there's another adaptation that we can't necessarily demonstrate here, and it's a behavioral one. It's an adaptation that helps him with the competition aspect. The desert is full of other large raptors like golden eagles, red-tailed hawks, ferruginous hawks, even some peregrine falcons, all these birds that are, or other types of falcons, all these birds that are exceptionally good at catching their food. Golden eagles are huge birds that can take on a vast array of animals as prey, small things and large things. Red-tailed hawks are one of the most generalist raptors we have in the country. Ferruginous hawks are the largest hawk in the country, so they too can take out really large things. And the list goes on and on. But this little guy is much smaller than all of them, and he's not particularly fast, but what he does have is good agility and social living. Because the Harris's hawk is a social hawk, which, by the way, is the only known social hawk in the world, like complex social, because the Harris's hawk is a social hawk, him or the whole clan can hunt a variety of prey that would otherwise be inaccessible to them. So if they're like a pile of brush, that ground squirrel might have disappeared from any other hawk. But the Harris's members go down to that brush pile and kick at it and scream at it and try to flush the squirrel out so that the rest of the family can ambush. Alternatively, if they're catching something really large and fast, a jackrabbit, which can run faster than a Harris's hawk can fly, you might try outmaneuvering it at first, but in the event that the first hawk can't catch up, a second hawk can take over. And then a third hawk can take over. And we call this a relay chase, where they take turns chasing the rabbit so that eventually the rabbit gets tired and the hawks remain fresh throughout the entire chase, eventually catching something that would otherwise be inaccessible to them. And then they have one other strategy they use while they're hunting as a pack. It's called the Surprise Pounce. It's actually pretty simple. Basically, they all get their eyes on a prey item, and then they all fly up high, and then they descend at once from every angle. And that prey animal, maybe it's a squirrel, maybe it's a mouse, maybe it's a rabbit, is shocked and confused, and there are hawks everywhere. So they get the jump on that animal, so to speak. And there's one more interesting thing that a pack of hawks will do. And it has to do with before they even start to chase their prey. It's while they're still looking for it. A Harris's hawk pack will do something called backstacking or backstanding, which is exactly as it sounds. One hawk will go and land on top of a perch. Maybe it's a saguaro cactus, maybe it's some larger tree, maybe it's a fence post. And then a second hawk will come and land on top of the first hawk. And then a third hawk might come and land on top of the second hawk. And then if you Google it, you can find photos of up to 3 Harris's hawks. It's actually one and then a little totem pole full of Harris's hawks looking out over the desert, searching for their food. That pack might look like mama bird, papa bird, this year's kids, and last year's kids. It can be up to 7, according to a lot of the literature, 7 individuals. But it's not always 7. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 5. And sometimes the Harris's hawk is solo. Maybe they don't have a pack. That's okay too. So the Harris's hawk, designed for desert living, hot, dry, sunny. They have a diverse things that they can eat for their diet. Living is the complete opposite. We're not hanging out in the desert with the next bird. We're going to a much colder, but similarly dry region, as it were. And we'll make a little switch right now. Bye-bye, Chester.
So here we have to meet a slightly bigger bird than Chesterland. You might notice this is Bridport. And Bridport is also a hawk, but she's a hawk known as a rough-legged hawk. And if I bring her a little bit closer to the camera, if she gets comfortable with that, you might be able to see on her legs, they look kind of rough. Well, I always thought that was an interesting descriptor, rough, because they're actually covered in feathers. Feathers are kind of soft, but from far away, they look like they have a rough texture. The interesting part of this is that her feathers are covered all the way down to the tops of her feet. All her legs are coated in this thick down that we were talking about that keeps birds warm. So it might not surprise you to learn that this bird is not a desert dwelling species at all. She doesn't live in a climate that's really hot or even nice and temperate like it is in New England. She lives in a climate where it's pretty cold most of the year. And those feathers on her legs help keep her warm. They help preserve the heat that's generated inside of her body, keeping it close to her so that she doesn't get cold on Arctic nights. Because that's where these rough-legged hawks are found. They're found in northern Canada, in Scandinavia, and in Russia. Over in Europe, they're called rough-legged buzzards, but it's the same bird. And she's got those nice downy feathers coating her legs so that she can stay warm. Birds are homeothermic and they're endothermic, just like us. You may have heard the words cold-blooded and warm-blooded. A better way to describe that is endothermic. We generate our heat inside of our body. That's why wearing a sweater works. If you put a sweater on a snake, it's actually not going to help them at all because they can't generate heat inside of their body. They need it from the outside world. But birds and human beings, we generate our heat internally. So having that thick coat of downy feathers or a thick parka helps us stay warm. Now, another interesting thing you might notice about her, if you were looking at Chesterland or Harris's hawk's feet before, noticing the rough-legged hawk's feet, you might say her toes look kind of stubby. They look a little bit short, especially in comparison to the other hawk. Now, this bird outweighs our Harris's hawk almost twice. So she weighs more than 2 pounds, whereas he weighs more like 1.5 pounds. And yet she has these much, much smaller toes. Now that would seem like a disadvantage, especially for a big hawk like this. She probably wants to hunt things like snowshoe hare. Maybe she's even going after Arctic foxes up in the tundra. And she really can't do that with her short, stubby toes. But 2 things about that are there are plenty of things for her to eat in the Arctic that are small enough for those toes to wrap around. Things like voles and things like lemmings. People often refer to the lemmings as the pacemakers of the Arctic because their population size dictates the population size of all of the predators that eat them. Much like rough-legged hawks, much like snowy owls, and those Arctic foxes will eat those lemmings too. And so she can get away with having these short, stubby toes because there's still enough for her to catch and eat. But those short, stubby toes are there for a really, really good reason. And it's that she doesn't get frostbite as easily as a bird with longer toes would. You know, imagine being outside on a cold day. I imagine you guys up in Ontario, it's probably a little chilly today. And if you go outside without gloves on, your fingertips, maybe the tips of your ears, if you're not wearing a hat, are going to get cold. They're going to get cold the first part of your body because they're the farthest away from where you're generating all the heat in your body's core. You have to pump your warm blood all the way out to the ends of your fingers, and it often doesn't make it with all of the heat intact. So if she had long, thin toes, they would get really, really cold, and she would be prone to getting frostbite. But those short, stubby toes help keep that warmth close to her body, and again, help preserve her to hunt another day. Now, some other things you might notice is Bridport flaps her wings around. She hasn't been in this particular room for a few days, so she's just kind of checking it out, maybe not feeling as comfortable as she should in here. So she's splaying out her wings for you. She's got quite the long wingspan, especially for her body size. And those long wings help her deal with what you would definitely find up in the Arctic. You don't see a lot of trees or tall plants and vegetation growing near the Arctic Circle, mostly because the growing season up there is very, very short. But in addition, it's hard for plants to grow that tall when there's so much wind blowing all the time. But this bird can take advantage of that. She can actually hover in midair using those long wings. She gets herself pointed in the direction that the air is blowing and just wavers her wings, rotating them slightly, beating herself forward into the wind just as fast as the wind is pushing her back. And she can stay almost stationary, hanging there in the air. And that provides her a great advantage for hunting as well, because she can stay up high above the Arctic tundra looking for lemmings and voles and good things to eat. Those lemmings can't see her because she's so far up there. And there's also not great opportunities for perch hunting. Red-tailed hawks is another very closely related hawk that you see a lot in North America. They tend to hunt from perches like telephone poles, like trees. But she can't perch on a big tree. There really aren't that many big trees up in the Arctic. And so she has this long-winged ability to hover, perching on the wind, essentially. Now, as you might imagine, given that there aren't that many trees up there in the Arctic, a rough-legged hawk probably would have trouble finding a place to nest. But they take advantage of what is there for them. So rough-legged hawks will nest on cliff ledges, very similar to peregrine falcons, for example, and they'll also nest even right there on the ground. Now, you might be wondering, given that this is an Arctic bird, you probably are familiar with another Arctic raptor, the snowy owl. Snowy owls are totally white, or they're white with a few black splotches. They look just like the snow that's covering the Arctic. Bridport's not totally white. I can turn her around a little bit. Ooh, she's just going to show off her wings. That's all she's interested in right now. She's got a little white butt, but she's not totally white like a snowy owl. So she might have trouble blending in to the Arctic in the wintertime when it's covered in snow. But in the summer, when the tundra is covered in moss and lichen and rocks and hillocks of grass, she can settle down on a nest that's right there on the ground, cinch down on top of those eggs like a good mother rough-legged hawk, and blend right into those grasses, so that predators that might be interested in eating her eggs or her young, maybe an Arctic fox, maybe even a polar bear, they're not even going to see her. They're just going to think she's another hillock of grass out there on the horizon. And when wintertime comes, rough-legged hawks actually migrate south. The Arctic winter is a little bit intense for them. There's not enough food for them all to eat. So they do come south, especially to our area here in Vermont, sort of mid-latitude Vermont, to find good things to eat in the winter. So right now, it's early April. Rough-legged hawks are headed back north, and they're headed back north for the breeding season. So we'll be seeing them on their migration north over in Ontario. And they will be coming back south to us probably in November of this year, that continual cycle. So a little bit about Bridport, her story, how she ended up here. It has to do with that migration, actually. So Bridport came to live with us back in 2008. She was brought into our rehab clinic. Someone found her on the side of the road in Bridport, Vermont, which is about an hour north of where we are here. It's a big, flat valley region. So, she's pretty comfortable there, as if it was a good wintering ground. But being that she was born in the Arctic, she probably had no experience with people. No roads, no cars, no anything like that. And so when she saw a tasty vole running across the road, she thought, I'm going to go grab that. And then she got hit by a car. So she unfortunately has an injury to her right wing. You can see sort of asymmetrical. This wing right here sticks out a little bit farther than the other one does. And so that prevents her from flying as well as a wild rough-legged hawk could, and making those migrations to the Arctic and back every year. So that's why she's with us. She was kind of a young bird when she came in, so we think she's probably about 11 years old. And we hope that she lives with us for another 20 years or so. These guys can live into their late 20s or early 30s pretty easily. That's all I have to say about Bridport, our rough-legged hawk. I think Nathan might bring Chesterland back out for a minute so you guys can really compare and contrast. You can see these two very, very different birds right next to each other. And then I want to know what kind of questions you guys have for us.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing the Hawks in just a second. Yeah, guys, let's dive into questions. Yeah. If we want to start with Miss Martin's class, take it away, guys.
Raise your hand if you have a question. Go ahead, Mila.
What is the biggest thing that hawks will try to catch and to eat?
What is the biggest thing that a hawk would try to catch and eat? Well, on their own, out in the wild, each one of these hawks would probably not be able to catch anything bigger than, say, a young cottontail rabbit or a really big fat gray squirrel, something that weighs about half a pound, 3/4 of a pound. But a Harris hawk that works together in a pack with other Harris hawks, they can bring down a jackrabbit, which is a much larger animal. It's more like 7 or 8 pounds, for example. And there are other larger hawk species out there in the world. Nathan mentioned the ferruginous hawk. Those guys routine jackrabbits and large things like that. Good question.
Great question. All right, let's head to Miss Charles's class.
Assis, go. We are going. Okay. Assis, go.
Where do you store the birds in your building?
Okay.
Where do we store the birds in our building?
Yeah.
That's a great question. These two do not live right here in our office building and where we do some of the education work. They have buildings that they live in called aviaries. They each have their own individual aviary. It's like their room that they don't share with any other birds. And for the Harris hawk, his is heated in the winter times because, again, he's a desert bird. He can't deal with Vermont winters. And our rough-legged hawk lives out.
Awesome. Sorry, that cut out just a little bit, but it might have been good for some of the classes. Sometimes it's just for me, so we'll go on to the next question. I also want to note we've got a group watching on YouTube Live. If you guys want to type in questions as well in the chat bar, I'll pass them on to Anna and Nathan, so please do that. Let's head to Miss Dix's class. You guys have one? Come on up.
How high does the hawks fly?
How high do they fly? Not all that high, really, especially in their day-to-day travels. They're not going to fly more than probably a couple of 100 feet, maybe just 100 feet up in the air is how high they'll get. On migration, though, for this particular bird, they can fly a little bit higher, maybe a mile and a half. Some hawks fly as high as 3 miles in the air on their long-term migrations, but they're not known for, being up there with the jumbo jets. That's actually something that the vultures can do, which is really interesting.
Yeah, but still, 3 miles is like, it's over 15,000 feet. That's an incredible.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Very cool. All right, Miss Alderson's class. Come on up, guys.
Over here. This is where they can see.
Where did Chester come from?
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to tell you all that earlier. But Chester Lynde came from Chesterland, Ohio. He was bred in captivity there by a falconer, or a breeder who provides birds for falconry. And if you don't know, falconry is a sport of hunting, only instead of using guns, a falconer would train a hawk or a falcon, sometimes an eagle, to hunt with and for them. And there's a relationship between the human and the bird, and they go out together to find prey. It's practiced all around the world, and it's been around for hundreds of years, thousands. How many thousands of years? 1,000, 2,000?
At least 2,000.
2,000?
Yeah.
Thousands of years. This hawk is actually a very popular bird in modern falconry. So this person was breeding Harris's hawks, and then the falconer who obtained him actually donated him to Vince at a very early age, back in 2001, his hatch year. And he did that so that Vince could have an uninjured bird to make more exciting flight demonstration programs. So Chesterland was destined to be with humans, and instead of falconry, he's an educator.
Very cool. What a great story. All right, let's go to Mr. Bartnick's class. Guys.
My question is, why is one of the birds more bigger than the smaller bird?
Did you guys catch that?
I'm not sure we caught that.
Sorry, guys.
Why is one of the birds bigger than the other bird?
Why is one of the birds bigger than the other bird?
Very good question. Why is one of the birds bigger than the other bird? Well, they have completely different lifestyles. Basically, there are over 600 species of raptors in the world, including the hawks, the eagles, the owls, the falcons, and all of them lead slightly different lives. That's how they can coexist on the planet together, is because this one hunts mostly voles and is really big, or this one hunts mostly voles but is really small and hunts at night or near dawn. They all have these areas that they occupy, which biologists call that a niche. So the niche of a rough-legged hawk, they get a good advantage from being this big. This is the right size for a rough-legged hawk to be an adequate predator in the Arctic. The Harris hawk gets an advantage from being that size. Maybe it's something that they can maneuver in and out of brush more easily for being a little bit smaller than the rough-legged hawk. Another trend that we see is called, biologists call it the Bergman's rule, and it's not, it's a trend, it's not a law, but the farther away you get from the equator, so the more toward the North Pole and more toward the South Pole, the bigger animals tend to be. Think about a moose in Canada, or little tiny white-tailed deer down here, for example. So this hawk, being Arctic, makes sense. It's bigger than the desert hawk by that level.
Oh. Great answer. The hawk, was very excited about your answer. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right, let's do a second round of questions, guys. We'll go back to Miss Martin's class.
How many different species of hawks are there? And how do you class them?
Oh, man.
You're my favorite question asker. So the first part of your question, how many species of hawks there, I'm probably not going to be able to give you a very adequate answer or very accurate answer. I would say, so if you subtract the owls and the falcons from my answer before, you get about 240 birds that are either hawks or harriers. I'm going to get back to me on, because I don't actually know the answer to that. Stump the educator. How do you classify them is another thing entirely. In fact, these raptors that we've been talking about, the owls, falcons, and hawks, they're not actually closely related to each other. They belong to 3 different families on the bird family tree. On one hand, you have the owls, on the other, you have the falcons, and on the other, you have the hawks, the eagles, the harriers, the vultures, and things like that. These 2 birds are somewhat more closely related to each other than you might expect, given how different lives that they lead. This bird is a member of a genus called the Buteos, because they're so beautiful, but that's not why. It's the Latin term for hawk, buteo. So she's Buteolagopus, that's her scientific name. The Harris hawk is called Parabuteo unicinctus, so like a buteo hawk, but not quite in the same genus. So these guys are related to each other more closely than either of them are to falcons, but not as closely as this bird is to a red-tailed hawk, for example.
Awesome. Nice to get the taxonomy into a presentation. Very rare. Good question.
I love it.
All right, let's go back to Miss Charles's class.
How fast is a hawk?
Ooh. Notoriously slow, actually. How fast can Chesterland fly? Probably faster than her.
So we know that jackrabbits can run at about 50 miles an hour, and we know that Harris's hawks can't fly that fast.
So there's a cap on 50 miles an hour for our Harris's hawk here. Probably for the rough-legged, it actually depends on the wind speed. Is she fighting the wind, or is the wind at her back in terms of how fast she's traveling over the ground? Under her own power in a no-wind situation, I'd be surprised if she could break 30 miles an hour.
Okay. And just so the classes know, you guys have mentioned falcons a few times. So the fastest bird on Earth is the peregrine falcon, and how fast can they fly by comparison?
Oh, so fast. So in level flight over the ground, probably 60 or 70 miles an hour. In a dive, which is their special hunting tactic that the falcons have, to dive down out of the sky on top of their prey, Peregrines have been clocked at over 242 miles an hour, which I believe was documented by National Geographic.
In
Awesome.
2007.
Thanks. Always like to get that in if we can. All right, let's head to Ms. Dix's class again.
What variety of colors can hawks come in?
Say that again really quick.
What variety of colors can hawks come in?
What variety of colors can hawks come in, guys?
Colors. That's a really good question. All the different kinds of brown that you can imagine.
As well as some whites and some creams.
Mm-hmm.
One interesting thing about their coloration is hawks tend to have a type of camouflage called counter shading, which is where they tend to be more colored on the belly or the underside and more darkly colored on the back or the upper side. In that way, it blends in more with the sky above, and their back blends in more with the glow. This is something you see in a lot of birds, actually, most of them, but in hawks. Definitely not actually the Harris's hawk.
He's got a different kind of coloration going on.
He's just a shadow.
So there's no brightly colored hawks, there's no bright yellows or blues or greens or anything like that?
No, definitely no blues.
Okay.
I can't think of any greens other than the red-tailed hawk and the red-shouldered hawk, which have a kind of russet orange color. There's no like scarlet macaws of the hawk world. No.
Right. There are some colorful falcons like the Aplomado falcon and the American kestrel, but they're not hawks.
Okay, perfect. I want to stress too, you guys mentioned red-tailed hawks earlier. Certainly for the Ontario classrooms in New Jersey, I don't know how far south they go, but red-tailed hawks can hover perfectly flat in the air too. It's one of the coolest things you'll ever see in nature. So if you get a chance to see them, they're really neat. All right, let's go to Miss Oliverson's class.
I got somebody come on.
Yeah, take your time.
Are those two birds almost extinct?
Oh, by no means. That's a great question. These guys are actually doing very well right now in their current habitats. They're both considered by scientists to be least concern. That means that we're concerned, of course, about the health of all animal populations, especially as humans continue to grow. But these two are least priority. They're more worried about raptors like the Aplomado falcon that Nathan mentioned, about the California condor, about the spotted owl. Those birds are considered critically endangered and we're focusing our limited resources on them. That doesn't mean that these guys will be just fine forever. And scientists are always looking out for problems that these species might face and hoping that they continue in a stable way throughout the rest of human history and our interactions with them. But we never do know, and we never know what consequences our actions might have, so we keep an eye on them.
To tack on to that, the Harris's hawk has an interesting population history in that, so their range in the United States is a lot of the Southwest. When we started building cities in the Southwest, primarily I'm thinking Phoenix, Yuma, and Tucson, Arizona, those populations, rather than disappearing or like falling to humans, actually expanded northward, and so their range expanded. As the decades have progressed, Harris's hawks have now made their way back into the city, so back southward, and they are now among the urban wildland interface wildlife. So humans and Harris's hawks can coexist in the cities, and people, just like red-tailed hawks and peregrine falcons, can find Harris's hawk nests in the middle of a big city in the Southwest.
Very cool, guys. All right, we'll take one last question from Mr. Bartnick's group, and then we'll wrap up from there. So, guys, come on up.
How many birds do you have? How many birds do you have?
How many birds do we have? Yes?
So it's a little hard to hear you guys. Give a thumbs up. Is that the question? How many birds do you guys have? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yes, good. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right. You're such a low octave there. We're having trouble hearing you. But we have 15 birds that are part of our education team. So birds like Bridport and Chesterland that come out and stand on our gloves and help us do programs like this one. We also have an additional 27 or 28 exhibit raptors. So those birds get to live in big aviaries outside all the time, where they don't get interacted with by us, but people can come and see them and watch them in those aviaries outside. So that's a little bit about the raptors that we have. We also have a collection of 7 songbirds who are on permanent exhibit, a cardinal, a couple of mourning doves, that sort of thing, as well as a few reptiles. We have a wood turtle, a box turtle, and 2 corn snakes.
Cool, guys. All right, so as we wrap up, with the knowledge that when we're done this hangout, I'm going to pass along the website for you guys, and a picture of Harris's hawks stacking on top of each other, because that's just super cool. Is there anything else you guys would like to share with classes about how they can learn more about what you guys do or about birds in their own backyard? Anything to point kids to?
Just point them to Cornell.
Yeah, there's actually a really great website called allaboutbirds.org, which is curated by Cornell University. And if there's anything you want to learn about any bird in the United States or North America, that is a great place to start. It's well organized and it's full of information. And if you dig deep enough, you can find like their bird biology lab, which I can't remember what it's called, but you use it in some of your slideshows. Mm-hmm. And it teaches all about bird anatomy, bird population histories, and ecology.
Excellent, guys. And for anyone, again, when you guys are in your own backyard, wandering down the street, in parks local to your home, there's always bird guides. You can find out what it is that you're actually looking at, which is a lot of fun. You can hear the calls. You can do all that. It's great stuff. Thanks, guys. This was wonderful, as always. So for the classes, especially new classes, what I always do at the end of every hangout, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. So every class is now demuted. And if you guys could join me in saying a big thank you to Anna and Nathan. Thanks for the enthusiasm. Great questions, guys. Anna, Nathan, thanks so much. It's always wonderful to have you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, we'll talk soon.